Well, I want to offer an official welcome and say thank you for being here today. Thank you for carving out time for the important endeavor here at the University of San Diego. My name is Rick Virgin. I'm Vice President for Advancement here at the University of San Diego. Delighted to be here and joined today. Dean Tim Keene, just so you know, you're getting the number 2 or number 3 fill in here. Dean Tim Keene was supposed to offer an official welcome and was not feeling well, feeling like he had a fever, and so decided best not to be here. So we congratulate him on that. So we're all grateful for that. And I want to kick off this afternoon just by talking about how excited we are to have the 40th, that's 40, 40th Annual Economic Roundtable here at the University of San Diego. The University of San Diego is celebrating its 75th anniversary this year. We've been at the Economic Roundtable business for 40 years, okay? So it's very exciting. 4 decades of collaboration and organizing what we believe is the largest free economic outlook event for the region between University of San Diego, the County of San Diego, and Workforce Partnership. We're also proud to welcome the addition of the San Diego Foundation's Policy and Innovation Center as a partner this year as well. So thank you very much. We're also beyond thrilled to have Mary Daly with us today, and just got a chance to speak with Mary just a few minutes ago. We were having a moment actually talking about if you're ever feeling stressed out about the world, the political, economic situation, stuff at home, whatever it is, come and spend time with our students here at the University of San Diego, and you will immediately have your frame of mind changed. You will feel optimistic, you will feel good about the world, and you will feel good about the future. Mary is here to join us celebrating the 40th anniversary with this community event. And also want to give a shout out to our impressive panel, Jerry Sanders, Carol Kim, and Kyra Green, who are joining us this afternoon, so thank you very much. We're also extremely grateful for our presenting sponsor, C3 Bank. And we have AJ Moyer here who's representing. C3 Bank, we have a partnership with C3 Bank, and they have hired our students. They have had internships for our students. They have USD students and alumni as customers of the bank. I'm also going to give a quick shout out to C3 Bank. One of their partner affiliated businesses is ABP Realty. C3 Bank and ABP Realty support student scholarships here at the University of San Diego, and particularly for the Knauss School of Business and the Burnham Moores Real Estate Center. And so for that, we say thank you very much. So, AJ Moyer is president of C3 Bank and a USD grad. From 2001, got a bachelor's of accountancy. AJ is a CPA with over 13 years of experience in financial planning and analysis, and he hates when I do this. AJ was also valedictorian of his class, so that may be the last time I do that. So we like to brag on AJ because he exemplifies what USD grads go out and do in the world. They are excellent members of the community. They help create jobs. They help build up families and help others who are on the fringes of society who need our help and support. And they exemplify what is best about the University of San Diego in terms of building up this region and providing some of the best graduates in the world that we have to offer, and go out and help throughout the state of California, throughout the country, and beyond our borders. And AJ is an excellent example of how we do that here. So we are proud and humbled to have him, and so I'd like to call AJ up to the stage. So thank you very much.
Wow, I was not expecting those remarks, so my quick words aren't going to come close to that. And it's not very often I write down some words to say, and Tim not showing up today really messed up my speech, because the first thing I started with was thank you, Tim, and now it's thank you, Rick. So I'm not writing down words anymore. But as Rick said, I'm the president and CEO of C3 Bank, and just really happy to be here. Congratulations to USD and all the partners for the 40th annual. Again, I'm very proud of the fact that this information is here for all of us to share. I'm a big believer in economic data being a baseline for personal and business decisions. And although it's always hard to predict the future, it's great for discussion and to have that baseline as you move forward in your business. For those that don't know us at C3 Bank, we ourselves are going to celebrate a milestone this year. We'll be 10 years in business. And we're very passionate about growing San Diego and investing in San Diego. We have to date done $1.3 billion worth of loans, most of which has been in the San Diego County to help infrastructure, job growth, and development. We're very focused on helping the small and medium-sized businesses in our county and supporting them day to day, and we know that's kind of the lifeblood of the workforce here as well. We have a lot of fun. We are a small private bank, makes us nimble and different, and half of our ownership group is USD alumni, which we're very proud about. So with that being said, I just happy to continue to support the conference and happy to have all you here. Look forward to a really healthy discussion. And with that, I'd like to welcome Chairwoman Nora Vargas from the San Diego County Board of Supervisors.
Hello, everyone. Buenas tardes. Happy Friday. Are you excited? I mean, we're talking about business, economy, all cool stuff, how we're going to make this region better. So I want to tell you that it's been a wonderful morning for me. I mean, I'm going to take a point of privilege and let you know that this morning I got to welcome a whole bunch of Californians to the announcement that Tony Atkins is running for governor. So it was a really cool morning for me. When I got out there, I was like, whoa. But it was exciting because I think it brought together a lot of different folks, that I think when I was thinking about it and coming here, I thought about really what is the power of San Diego, which is that ability for business, unions, academia, nonprofits, and community to come together to really think about how we thrive, how we really create innovation, and how we do great work so that our communities can be healthier and stronger. And to me, that is like the most amazing thing. And to be able to serve as the chair of the Board of Supervisors and watch this like on the front line is just super exciting. So I'm really, really happy to be here. I want to say congratulations. When I looked at Kira and I was like, wait, 40 years? Really? That long? And we were babies when you all started, but excited to be here. Yeah. Excited to be here about to be able to welcome you and to see the fact that all of you are working together and really thinking about what innovation and economic growth looks like for San Diegans. And so I'm honored that the County of San Diego gets to continue to be a partner. We're going to continue to be committed to this process and being part of this. I want to make sure that I take a moment and say welcome to Mary Daly from the San Francisco Federal Reserve Bank. We are so happy to see you and to be here. And I already heard from Tony that you have all sorts of wonderful ideas, and so I'm excited about the work that we'll do together. I also want to thank the partners from not only UCSD, the Workforce Partnership, C3 and the San Diego Regional Policy and Innovation Center for being part of this innovative conference. To me, as the chair of the County Board of Supervisors, when I share this with folks, people ask me, usually people, well, what does a supervisor do? And they're like, oh, you're a supervisor. Oh, that's cool. So what do you supervise? And I don't know how many of you knew what a county supervisor was before COVID, be honest, all right? And so let's be real. We saved you. Anyway, so I had to say that because I was the vice chair of the committee. So anyway, I have to take a little bit of credit for it. But, the County of San Diego is, I have the honor of representing, it was 3.3 million people. We are the second largest county in the state of California. We have a budget of about $8.1 billion. And we have 20,000 employees that wake up every day to try to do everything they can to make sure that people's lives are better. We are the safety net of our community. And so it makes me so proud to be able to be here today and to say thank you for really thinking today about outside the box, really thinking about innovation and thinking how we work. Because, from the first day that I got elected, we were doing the work, particularly around making sure that we kept our communities safe and healthy. But we understand firsthand how the pandemic really impacted our communities. We know that although the small businesses continue to be the backbone of our region and our economy, they were very much hurt by the pandemic. And one of the groups that was mostly impacted was women, and women, particularly women of color. And so for me, it's been really thinking about what is it that we can do as San Diegans and as a county to make sure we continue to invest so that we can take it to the next level. So I'll tell you that as a county, we've invested over $30 million in small business grants. And the reason why that's important is because we're investing in the community without asking anything but making sure that they continue to thrive and that these small businesses have what they need to be able to succeed. And more importantly, continue to have their employees be a part of the fabric of this community. For me, it was really important as we were looking at this work, sort of where do we fit into the bigger picture of the economy as a county? And one of the things that I did was champion the creation of the Office of Economic Prosperity and Community Development. And it was important for me to create this office because I heard loud and clear that there needed to be one, that regional perspective to bring people together. And it was being done before, but we needed to come together because it's only together that we're able to ask for the dollars that we deserve from the federal and state government to make sure that we are investing in our local communities. And so I'm really excited about the creation of this office and the work that we've been doing. We've prioritized economic development strategy as a county, and we're leveraging the support that we can get. I think all of you know this, but in San Diego, 59% of all businesses have less than 5 employees, and 75% have fewer than 10. And so this office is going to really focus on collaborating with different entities to make sure that we promote small businesses and entrepreneurship in the county. And when I say that, I'm not just saying it because we cut a ribbon or we did a board letter and then it happens. For me, what's really important is that when I say that government must work for all and not just for some, is we have to put ourselves in people's, stories and figure out what they need from us. And so I was really, really proud that we were able to take action. I think some of you have heard this because this innovation came specifically from COVID, right? During COVID, I think all of you remember how many of you bought cookies from people, how many of you bought cakes. Some members of our community started making empanadas, tamales, all sorts of different things to be able to survive, just to survive. And from that, we were able to take that work and we created a policy based on work that the state of California had done, and we created the MICOS program. I don't know how many of you have heard of the MICOS program. And the MICOS program is the Micro Enterprise Home Kitchen Operations Program. We have now businesses, small businesses in our communities that came from, making tamales, empanadas, tostadas, cakes, and all sorts of really cool stuff. And now they're selling them from their homes. And we're doing this, making sure that people are healthy, they're safe. They now have, they're able to go through the county and they get a certificate and all these wonderful things because it's laying the foundation for folks. So those that want to continue on and get a bricks and mortar and actually have their restaurants, which some of them are able to get their feet wet in the process and be able to do it. And then others are actually able to continue to do the work that they're doing because they're supplementing the income for their families. That's the kind of innovation that we need to be doing here in San Diego County so that our communities can not just survive, but also thrive. And so I'm excited about that. The other thing that we heard loud and clear from folks is that we need childcare. Childcare needs to be a part of the bigger economic perspective. Yes, you can clap, it's a big deal. Childcare needs to be at the core of how we make sure that this is not a woman's issue, this is a family issue, this is a community issue, this is an issue that we need to be thinking about regionally so that our communities can thrive. And so we actually were able to do a blueprint, and as a result of the blueprint, we are now working together to make sure that we are integrating childcare as part of our economic workforce. And really, it's one of my top priorities. And as I said to folks, there's a couple of ways of looking at this, right? It's not just making sure that your child, and it's one of the most important things, your child is safe and in a place where they're being developed and they have all the tools that they need. But then the other component of it is you have folks creating small businesses, right? And in partnership with academia, like Southwestern College, and organizations like the Chicano Federation, they've come together and they are able to build entrepreneurs in this field. And that's exactly what we're supposed to be doing here in San Diego to be able to move forward. So those are just some of the things that we're doing. But I would be remiss if I don't touch upon something that's very important for me, is parte de mi corazón, right? I think most of you know I was born and raised in Tijuana. So being fronteriza is very important to me because one of the things that we can't forget when we're talking about business is the power of our binational region and who we are. There's 7 million of us together in the Cali Baja region. The amount of economic impact that we have in this region is over $20 billion to the San Diego County, to San Diego in production every year. There's a value of trade of San Diego makes about $4 billion per year. And I think the thing that I remind people, there's over 50,000 people who cross that border every day to work. Over $50,000. So that's why Ped West being open should matter to everybody in this room. That's why the border wait being more than 3 hours every day should matter to everybody here, because this is really part of our economic engine, and we need to do the best that we can to make sure that everyone who's here is able to go back and forth and continue to impact our economy the way that they do. And so I said to you, we are the second largest county in the state of California. I do believe that we have a responsibility to ensure that government, business, academia, and all of us come together, nonprofits, and that we're innovative and we become champions for the work that we need to do. And so I'm really, really excited about your day today. I'm going to challenge you to be innovative, to think outside the box. And as I say to my team, not just my small group of team that works for me every day, but to the county team that we work with every day, no is not an option, right? We need to think outside the box, and we need to do everything that we can to make sure that we're innovative and that we're creative so that our communities can really thrive. And so today, I'm excited that you get to hear from one of the folks who has done amazing things in the county of San Diego. He did it when he was a council member. He's done it as a nonprofit leader, really investing in the future of our youth. And having now Tony Young be the interim president and CEO of the San Diego Workforce Partnership, I think is really, really something powerful for us as a community. We were supposed to meet for 10 minutes about a couple of weeks ago, right? And then before the holidays. And that 15 minutes turned into over an hour, and we have a list of action items of things that we're going to do together, because we're going to make sure that we're investing in our youth, we're going to make sure that we're partnering to work together, but more importantly, we're going to continue to do everything that we can so that the communities of San Diego County have the best opportunity to have the best quality of life. So with that, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful, productive session. And with that, I introduce one of my good friends, Mr. Tony Young.
Well, thank you all for joining us today. And specifically, I have a lot of appreciation for Supervisor Vargas. I used to work at the Board of Supervisors, and this is not my grandfather's or your grandfather's Board of Supervisors. I will guarantee you that. That's the type of leadership that we need, and we appreciate you being at our annual Economic Roundtable. All of our partners, I do appreciate you being here, and all your unwavering commitment to this collaborative effort. As the interim president and CEO of the San Diego Workforce Partnership, I stand before you with determination and gratitude. Today is not just a milestone, it is a celebration of 40 years of fostering economic dialogue and progress in our vibrant community. The San Diego Workforce Partnership collaborates with businesses, community-based organizations, elected officials, and funders to empower job seekers and employers. And we're honored to have Mary Daly, the distinguished president and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, here to enlighten us on her expertise. Alongside her is Daniel Innemark, the chief economist of SD PIC, engaging in a fireside chat about the future of our economy. In 2024, we stand at a pivotal moment. Now is the time for business, government, and community leaders to unite, uplifting all San Diegans and constructing an equitable, resilient workforce. Our focus is clear: access to skills, jobs, and careers that promote self-sufficiency. Over the past 6 months, the San Diego Workforce Partnership has prioritized cultivating partnerships between employers, educators, and job training professionals, securing more than $9 million to invest in sustainable employment opportunities for the more than 30,000 San Diego residents that we serve annually. Yet over 200,000 residents still unemployed are walking the streets every day. Our work is far from finished. When we support one another, our economy thrives and San Diego succeeds. And I'm delighted to welcome Daniel Enemark and Mary Daly for a captivating conversation about the economic future that lies ahead. Your presence here today reflects the commitment needed to drive this change, and thank you very much for you being here. Let's start this journey together toward a more prosperous San Diego for everyone. And as a representative from the Workforce Partnership, I appreciate all of you all as we move forward today. Thank you. Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much for being here.
Can everybody hear me? I could go on and on about Mary Daly, but I'll just say this. A year ago, Lauren and I were talking, and I said, you know who my absolute dream guest for the 40th annual Economic Roundtable would be is Mary Daly. And this feels like a dream come true. And I'm just so thrilled to be sitting here with you and having this opportunity to talk with you.
Well, thank you so much. That's extremely flattering. I really appreciate it. And I actually feel like, oh, wow, I've already accomplished part of my bucket list. Make a dream come true. And it's only January. So I'm already in. So I'm check. I'm
Absolutely.
in good shape. Hopefully
Absolutely.
year goes well.
All right. So let's just jump into it.
Sure, absolutely.
First, I'd love to hear, and I think we'd all love to hear, your outlook for the economy. You know, what are the takeaways, the key takeaways from 2023? What's your forecast for 2024?
Absolutely. So let me start with 2023. So remember, we began the year last year with high inflation and a booming labor market, and we were tightening policy at a rapid clip. And the conversation then was, will the Fed's tightening cycle fail and inflation will just completely never come back down, or will we have a recession? And that was the context. And the sentiment was pretty low, despite the fact that the economy was booming. And I would go out and do CEO roundtables, community talks, and what I'd hear is, it's too frothy, it's unsustainable. I had visuals given to me. One gentleman said, I feel like I'm riding a bike when I was a kid and I've lost the pedals. You know, those bikes where you lose the pedals and it's just going down the hill and there's nothing you can do and you just hope for the best and hang on. And then another young man who I met at a local retail outlet, he was there with his wife and 2 kids, and they were there on a Sunday shopping. And he said, and I'm asking him questions, don't identify what I do for a living, but I told him I was an economist, and I'm interested in how people are experiencing the economy. And he said, I feel like I'm on a treadmill. I'm on a treadmill because I'm making more money than I've ever made. I'm working 2 or 3 jobs. I have no more hours in the day. And when I come here to buy groceries, there's less and less in my cart, and I'm spending more and more of my income. And he said, I can't keep this up. I want to do better. What can I do? And I told this young man, which was a heartfelt rendering he was giving me about his life, I said, I'm working on it. It's going to take some time. Keep at it. Now, I don't know what happened to that young man, but I do know what happened to the economy. Throughout 2023, we, even with the banking stresses, which gave us another negative we had to work through, we end 23, with inflation much, much lower. People not yet, we're not there yet, and I'll talk about that in a moment, but it's much, much lower, and American families and businesses and communities are feeling a relief from that high inflation stress. We also ended with the economy starting to slow, so it looks like that froth is gone. And that froth being gone actually helps people feel like, okay, now I can get a foothold and I get a plan. So now where are we today in 2024, and where do I see us going? Well, I'm going to start with a couple of things. The economy is in a really good place. If you saw the sentiment numbers, the confidence numbers this week that come from the various surveys, people feel better. There was last month a vibe session. That was the last thing I was hearing about. Kyla Scanlon taught me this. She's an influencer, a journalistic person who does a lot of TikTok and things, and she tells me, oh, it's a vibe session. People feel bad, the data are good, it's a bad vibe. And that was 6 months ago, and I think, okay, I'm listening. But now I'm seeing sentiment data and confidence data be better. When I had a business roundtable here in San Diego this morning, what did I hear? Cautious optimism. I'm seeing an economy that is responding to monetary policy and coming into balance and inflation coming down, but not falling off the cliff and making a worrisome situation, and that's good. The second thing that I feel is in a good place is policy. Policy's in a good place. We got policy rate adjusted so it can do its work. We see that it is having an influence. And so now we're in a great place in the following situation. We know that policy's in a good place, the economy's in a good place, and we can start to be more patient to see what we need as a Fed to do next. The other thing that we can do is we can take a deep breath and we can say, what are the important work we need to do as communities, as people, as businesses to plan for our future. And that's the second thing I heard in the roundtable this morning that I really wanted to share, is that we had a lot of conversations about things that we were going to do to build our future forward. When I was at CEO roundtables last year, I only heard about inflation and how hard it was to hire anybody. Now I'm hearing, well, what about workforce housing? What about education? What about making our communities strong and vibrant and building an ecosystem? So, you know, I'm optimistic by nature, but I always tether myself to evidence. I am an evidence-based optimist. And I would say that the economy and the situation looks brighter than it did at the beginning of last year. There is a lot of work to do. There is no denying it. And I'm going to do my part at the Fed, but it's a lot of work to do for all of us to really get to where we want to be. But we're starting from a better place, for sure. I hope that helps.
That helps a lot. For those who might not be familiar, President Daley, in addition to being president and CEO of the San Francisco Fed, is also one of 12 voting members of the Federal Open Market Committee, which arguably makes her one of the 12 most influential economic policymakers in the world. The FOMC kind of sets interest rates, and so that has a huge impact on our economy. And you, as part of that, have a kind of a dual mandate, right? One is to keep inflation low, and the other is to maintain full employment or to keep unemployment low. When you look at the year ahead, which one of those seems more daunting, or which one seems more like a risk, or which clearly in 2023 your focus was inflation? What do you see when you see?
Oh, that's a great question. So you're right. We have what we call the dual mandate. If you follow the Fed, you've heard about the dual mandate: full employment, price stability. If you're ever talking to people in your friends and family, we explain it this way when, you know, people aren't Fed followers necessarily, is that everyone who wants a job can have one. That's full employment, and the dollar in your pocket or your wallet holds its value. That's price stability. So for us, last year, inflation was so far above our target, and the labor market was booming. As I said, firms were telling us they couldn't find workers, and workers were telling us they could have every job they wanted. So that was an economy where our only focus to achieve our goals needed to be inflation. And so we had that in mind: vigilance and resolute commitment to getting inflation down. At this point, with the economy in a good place, the risks more balanced, and the policy in a good place, what's happened is that dual mandate is back in a collective lens, right? I'm looking at both. Because what I want to do is I want to make sure that we deliver on low inflation, but do it without taking jobs by making the unemployment rate rise. So I would say that we're balancing those goals at this point. The risks to the economy are balanced, and the risks to both sides of our mandate are balanced. So we don't want to loosen policy too quickly, only to find that inflation gets stuck at way above target. That would be a miss. That would be a very scarring miss. And we don't want to try to get to 2 so quickly, like overnight, just to get that squeezed out, that we end up having this big run up in the unemployment rate, and then we've solved one problem for people, we brought inflation down, but we've given them another problem, we've taken their jobs. That is not a soft landing, in case you're wondering. And we want definitely to, just in case you don't know, but we definitely want, and it's because a soft landing is more. I mean, the reason I spend so much time talking to people is because to really understand what a soft landing means, you have to look at the eyes of people who want 2 things. You have to think of that gentleman I met in Walmart. Well, I shouldn't have said that. That gentleman I met at the large retail outlet. You have to think about that, and you have to think about that gentleman. And if we end up having an economy that delivers on 2% inflation and takes away jobs, we haven't made him any better off. In fact, maybe worse off. And so that's the commitment to the dual mandate, and I think both of those goals are in balance.
Yeah, speaking of the soft landing, that's all we heard last year. Was, are they going to achieve the soft landing? Then the window for a soft landing is getting narrower and narrower. And then all of a sudden people are saying, it's immaculate disinflation. You pulled it off, you did this incredible, you did the impossible. Do you feel like you've achieved the soft landing, or is there continuing risk?
No,
Okay.
no. So if anybody asks, the golden chalice is not yet ours, right? We do not declare victory. I think it's very important, and I mean this with all seriousness. There's a cost to declaring victory too soon. There's so many costs, but say there's victory. Well, then what we could end up with is inflation getting stuck at 3.9%, which is what it just printed, right? That's not price stability. 3.9% is not price stability. 2% is our target for price stability. So there's a gap. That's a 1.9 percentage point gap. There's a lot of work to do there. That doesn't mean that we don't have the tools or not getting closer. We are definitely getting closer. Look at all the progress we made last year. It just means we have to stick with it. We have to continue to work on it, and we have to do that in a different way than we did last year, because this year we also have to keep our eyes on the labor market, which is starting to slow. And so we have to calibrate very carefully to ensure that we continue to bring inflation down, and we ensure that we do it gently as we possibly can. So I say that the job is really one about calibration this year. What does it take? It takes patience. It takes gradualism. There's this term used in monetary policy. Ben Bernanke wrote a speech about it called gradualism. And the gradualism just means you take the time to look. You're facing a lot of uncertainty. You make sure you really get a look at the data, you look at it, you study it, you do it twice, 3 times, and then you take action. Because if you're quick to act, you can actually make mistakes. And mistakes aren't just things that they'll write about in history books. They're things that affect people, their lives and livelihoods.
You mentioned that we haven't yet achieved that 2% price stability or 2% inflation rate. What's keeping it elevated right now? Why is it 3.9 versus 2?
Oh, that's a great question. So, and I love detailed questions like that. I'm an economist by training, so who doesn't want to talk about the composition of inflation? Probably you, but I'm going to talk about it anyway, but to make it fun. And you can tell me, I'll ask for a show of hands, is it really fun? Okay, so really, it's actually very interesting and extraordinarily useful in the post-pandemic management of the high inflation. It's quite a bit different than how it's historically been. So pandemic comes, as we all know, and it basically shuts down the economy. And when it shuts down the economy, it simply destroys supply chains across the globe. It stymies demand, but then quickly 2 things happen. Federal relief comes in and supports families who didn't have incomes, and the rest of us who did have incomes because we kept our jobs just went home and worked. And then we massed up in piles of savings that we didn't ordinarily have because we had nowhere to go. And we did drain off some of those savings by going online and spending an enormous amount of time buying things, physical things, bicycles, stationary bikes, TVs, headphones. So when we're all fighting over the TV, everybody has their own headphones, Zoom equipment. I mean, in my family, we bought a lot of stuff, as did every other American family, right? Everybody bought a lot of stuff. And what was interesting is the switch of our spending as Americans, the pattern of our spending, it shifted quite dramatically away from services and to things, to goods. That is very unusual. 2/3 of spending is on services and only a third on goods. That shifted, half and half. Okay, so then what does that mean? Well, that means that demand for goods, things, is growing rapidly while supply of things is completely faltered. And that's inflationary. So goods price inflation shot up. We've been used to computer prices falling, bicycle prices falling, TV prices falling, even car prices falling. Those things all rose in price while that was happening. Okay, so that's thing one. Second thing that happened, huh?
The microphone a little closer.
Oh, sorry, guys. Second thing that happened, I couldn't tell. It's sort of, I have no idea what I'm doing, so, with the microphone. I'm very, very capable at monetary policy. Just being clear. Okay, back to it. So goods price inflation rises rapidly. The second thing that happens is that people, and this is really important, people want bigger houses. They want a lot of housing. Now they have money, so they go out and they're buying houses hand over fist. Housing prices are going up, so that boosts housing price inflation and rental price inflation as people move out of cities and they move into bigger areas where they feel like they have more outdoor space or just bigger environments because it's the pandemic. So that's happening. And then the third thing that happens is that labor, people working, especially in in-person settings, people are afraid. They don't want to come to work, and it's challenging. And so all of those workers, many of them just simply leave the labor force. They retire if they're older, they simply leave and go home if they're not, and that leaves a big hole in the labor force. That happens at the same time that demand for lower wage workers has gone up because we have all these need for Amazon drivers and all the delivery services that we're getting to our home, food delivery, goods delivery. And so this is just a big imbalance between demand and supply. And both of those things in housing and in services other than housing, that completely boosts core services inflation. So then we end up with core services inflation high, core goods inflation high, and an economy that is growing and there's no sign of relief. So we raise the interest rate, and what happens is while we're raising the interest rate to get the demand side of this back in balance, the supply chains also recover. So now last year what we had is goods price inflation came down, largely because the supply of goods started to come back through. Shipping improved, factories opened, the supply chains recovered, goods price inflation come down. At the same time, demand for goods started to wane and people shifted back over to services. And what's happening is more workers are coming to work now. Wages have been rising, attracts people into the labor market, and the Fed's raised interest rates. And so people just demand is in general slowing. So right now, two things are happening. Goods price inflation is coming down and services price inflation is coming down, both for housing and also for these other services. And that is, while others may call it an immaculate disinflation, I call it a purposeful march towards the normalization that comes from the post-pandemic supply chain recovery and the normal way that Fed policy rates work. You raise interest rates, demand slows.
Not quite as catchy of a name as immaculate disinflation.
Well, when you're a
it.
policymaker, if you look for a catchy name, you're typically going to be too narrow in your thinking and you're going to be wrong. So I'll leave that to the media guys who dream those things up. But it is catchy, immaculate disinflation. It just isn't immaculate. Yeah. It was purposeful.
So you wrote a great paper called The Economic Gains from Equity. And for the nerds in the audience, I encourage you to go read this paper. I'd love to hear from you. Why should we care about racial equity and what can we do to address it?
So let me say that when gaps in groups, whether it's race, ethnicity, gender, rural, urban, any location, you can look at gaps between people who are first-generation college students and other college graduates. You can think of so many places where there's gaps in opportunity. And why does that matter? Because talent is distributed evenly across the population, in all likelihood. Why wouldn't it be, right? And if talent's evenly distributed and you see gaps in opportunity, that means we're maybe missing the best coder ever to walk the earth. Might be living in rural Idaho, and we don't even know that person's there because they have never been given an opportunity to touch a keyboard or to give it a try. And so the concept of equity, the gains from equity, is that we're leaving talent on the table. When opportunities aren't even, talent is regularly left on the table, and we can't afford that. We're a nation that needs a growing and higher quality labor force. We need increased productivity to ensure that the pie for the next generation, the economic pie, is larger than the one we inherited. So, you know, the point of writing that paper is to say, closing these gaps is not simply about fairness. Closing those gaps is about the economic well-being of our society. Yeah. And that is something that is easy, I think, for all of us to commit to. We need to do that. It's our responsibility to the next generation.
Yeah, I appreciate that. By many
Thank you.
By many traditional measures, GDP and unemployment, the economy is doing well. You talked about vibe earlier, right? There's still a sense among many people, although maybe consumer sentiment is improving, there's still a sense among many of us that the economy doesn't work for all of us. And you know, housing and childcare and affordable middle-class jobs are often inaccessible without a very expensive college education. How do you reconcile those two views of the economy? Whether the economy is the economy booming, is the economy busting? Yeah.
So, you know, one thing that I think I find helpful, and when you talk with people and you dig in, you can see this. So last year, it didn't feel like it was working anywhere, right? Even in the basic thing, like my gentleman who was at the retail outlet, he's working his jobs, he's making better money, and he still doesn't get to do what he wants to do, and he still feels like he's on that treadmill. Right now, I do feel like people are stepping off the treadmill a little bit, and just as they walk, they gain ground. They're not on that treadmill. But it doesn't mean, and that's what we call the cyclical part of the economy, right? Cyclically, we're getting at a better place. The inflation rate's coming down, things are getting better, we're better off. What's still hard, though, is we face these structural things about how the economy works that need treatment. And we spent a lot of time at the roundtable that I had this morning with business leaders talking about things like, how do we create an ecosystem? These are things that business leaders brought up to me. The ecosystem that says, okay, I can offer a job, I can offer training. Where's the workforce housing that makes that equation complete? So if my hiring barrier isn't how much I can pay, or I can't, or is the worker skilled, it's can they afford to live near the place that I'm offering the work, well, then that's a barrier that will take a public-private community partnership to create the right ecosystem. And those are challenges that we haven't had to, they were there before the pandemic. But now the pandemic and the post-pandemic recovery has put a bright spotlight on them. And that's not something that's just here in San Diego. That's anywhere you go. In the 12th district, I have 9 states in the western United States, and I travel across the world and across the United States. I see the same problems in same places. Communities everywhere are struggling with, how do we make sure we have enough housing for our populations? How do we make sure that housing is at price points where various parts of the workforce can afford it? How do we get the right skills to the right places? The reason I focus these are the jobs I have. I have one tool, the interest rate, and I have 2 responsibilities, full employment and price stability. It's a narrow lane, but it's an important lane. The reason it's so important is that none of those things you just mentioned and we just talked about, that solve people's feeling the economy doesn't work for them, are even on the radar when inflation is 7%. They just aren't even talked about. They get swept aside while people frantically try to keep up. Now, as inflation's coming down, we can start to bring those things back to the forefront, and I can turn the job then back to you all who are working in localities and communities and states, and our fiscal agent, folks in Congress and in state legislatures to really take on this other work, which is we're through the pandemic, the worst of the inflation surge is behind us. Okay, now what do we do next?
Speaking of what we can do next and what we can do locally, as Chairwoman Vargas mentioned, San Diego's really big. It's the 5th largest county in America. 1% exactly of all Americans live here in San Diego County, and it's incredibly diverse. What can we do here to make our economy stronger, more resilient, more equitable? What can policymakers, businesses, educational institutions, nonprofits, what can we all do locally to improve our economy?
So one thing that I see, and I see this all over when I travel the district, is just what we're doing here. Come together, talk, learn from each other. You have an opportunity to meet people who don't work in your industry or business, because ultimately what I see in any of the successful communities that solve problems is you get right to the heart. It takes partnerships. It is very challenging for the government alone to do something, whether it's the local, state, or federal government, or just businesses alone to do something, or community groups alone to do something. You have to build these partnerships and say, collectively, what do we do? The second thing that I think is really important, and I learned this in my own organization, I have a lot of ideas. I've stopped saying I have a lot of good ideas. I just say I have a lot of ideas about what we can do. And then but what's really important is you have to pick 2 or 3 to all swim in the same direction to say, okay, what are we going to accomplish? And I think we probably don't do enough of that in our communities to say, oh, we have all these leaders here. What 2 or 3 things are we going to put all of our weight behind collectively, because they're the most pressing things to do? So those are just some basic things. I will say this, though, and I told you this when we were having a chat before for this event. I live in Oakland, California. I love Oakland, California. I moved there in 1996, and I'll be honest with you, I came from Missouri. Missouri's great, but I walked into Oakland, and I turned to my wife, and I said, oh my gosh, I'm home. And why did I love it? I loved it because it's diverse, it's vibrant, you can meet different kinds of people, etc., and they have one thing in common. They love Oakland. And their love of Oakland means they're going to try. Now, we get a beating in the press, and some of it is probably, relevant and deserved, but I still love it. But when I want to think about how to make Oakland better, you know where I come? San Diego. I'm not kidding. I come to San Diego and I meet with people who are doing workforce housing, or I met with someone who's working with the criminal justice system, for my Zip Code Economies podcast to move people as they move out of incarceration into jobs. And I said, how do we do that? How do we think about that? So I talk to people here in San Diego, because you do have that same thing. You have that thing where people who live in San Diego are proud to live in San Diego. You recognize all the problems you have and you want to make it better, but you did it, guys. I mean, you're proud, right? So I think capitalize on that. Put your things together. And one of the things we're thinking about in the Fed, one of the powers we have is to convene. And our community development group and our regional executives that have a footprint all over the 9 Western states, we're meeting all of people like you all over Salt Lake City, Boise, Idaho, outside of Portland, and everybody's thinking about the same problems, but we can convene all of you to share with each other how you're thinking about things and learning. And the lessons are going to be the same. Align on some strategic goals and do partnerships with public, private, and community to really get the job done. So thank you.
You mentioned your podcast, Zip Code Economies, which I encourage everybody to get out your phone now and subscribe to. If you think I can't subscribe to a podcast by an economist, it's too arcane, that's not the way it is. One of the things
that is how people think about it, though. Until you sell it.
I'm sure that people are afraid, but it really is very accessible. And there is one great episode where you interviewed two twins who worked with reality changers here.
Yes, here in San Diego.
And yeah, cheers for reality changers. And yeah, it's a wonderful podcast. I encourage people to listen to it. You also mentioned having 2 or 3 ideas, and back in the green room, you mentioned that you had 2 or 3 messages for your colleagues, and I wonder if you could share them with this audience.
So what happened is every year we bring in our new board members. So we have boards of directors in all of our offices. So the San Francisco Fed has a head office in San Francisco, a branch office in LA, a branch office in Salt Lake, branch office in Portland, and a branch office in Seattle. And that was original from 1913 to ensure that we have these 9 western states and we have to cover a vast territory. So the Salt Lake branch covers Idaho and parts of Nevada and Arizona, and then LA covers the Nevada and Arizona, and there's all these different groups are linked together. And we have Hawaii and Alaska, so we have then these board of directors members, and then we also have councils. We have an economic advisory council, a community advisory council, and a community depository institution advisory council, which we never say that whole word, we always say CDAC. Anyway, these folks, these new members, all came to the bank this week, Wednesday and Thursday, and all of our board and council members, the whole full teams came, and we introduced them to what we do at the Fed and why their service to us is so important. And I said, you're going to hear a lot of things over the next 2 days, but I want you to remember 3 things. There's only 3 things that are really important when you start your service. And I think these are 3 things that I want all of you to remember about what the Fed is like. So the first thing is that the economy is about people. So we are not simply looking at the data and aggregate numbers and calculating models and looking at empirical work. We have that. We absolutely use that. But the thing that you always have to go back to is that the economy is about people. And you have to be out talking to people, business leaders, worker groups, community groups, civic leaders, if you're going to understand the lived economy. That's why I spend time at retail outlets asking people questions. While it's a small data collection project that I do, it actually gives me the lived experience of the people. And that's why I have teams of people working at the San Francisco Fed who are about collecting this qualitative information that makes such a difference in how we can do our best work. The second thing to remember is that data are plural. Data is not a point. It's not 6 points. It is plural. And it's really like a pointillistic painting. If you think about a painting that's pointillistic, if you've never seen one, it's a million dots that make a picture that if you back really far away from it, you see only as a painting. But when you get up close, you realize that painting is made of all those little dots. And the artist had the patience and fortitude and persistence to ensure that all of the dots were made well, lined up, and gave the painting the depth that it has when you look at it from afar. The discipline that we need if we work at the Fed is to remember the economy and those data points. That's a pointillistic painting. And if we miss whole swaths of dot because we think we got it from afar, we will miss including lenses and voices that matter to us. And that brings me to the third thing that's important. Every voice, every lens, every perspective matters. Everyone. And so we need to be making sure that we're out there talking to people. So I spend time in Alaska, Hawaii, rural Idaho, San Diego, downtown Oakland, East Palo Alto. Every state in the district we are going, and we're going to not just a community, not the fly-in city, but the communities that also make up the fabric of those locations. And my colleagues, the beauty of the Federal Reserve System in 1913 is that the people who put this together, they put a group in Washington, the Board of Governors, and then they recognized the importance of knowing information from the communities that we're meant to serve. And they said, we're going to have 12 regional feds, and those regional fed presidents and their teams, apart from their daily responsibilities to do payments and banking and monetary policy, we're going to have them out there actually collecting information from the very people who are affected by our policies. And that has been a durable and important component of what the Federal Reserve banks do. And it's one of the reasons I love my job so much, because ultimately you only make good policy if you're out there. So the economy is about people, data are plural, every voice, every lens, every perspective matters. You guys are so kind.
You and I are similar in that when we go shopping, we pester people with questions. And I do that too. In fact, every restaurant I've been to recently, and particularly like fast casual places, I always ask, hey, do you mind me asking, what's the starting salary here?
Yes.
And the dollars number I always get is 16 and something cents. So that's within $1 of minimum wage. We have this $20 minimum wage in fast food coming, a $25 minimum wage, which you heard about in the Business Roundtable this morning for healthcare workers. Have you thought at all about kind of what do you expect that, what kind of impact do you expect that to have? Is that going to contribute to inflation here in California? Is it going to reduce overall employment? Do you have any thoughts?
So this has been a long studied economic topic, and the minimum wage has been long thought about by economists and not just policymakers, like economists trying to figure out what the impact of the minimum wage is. And it really depends, right? When the minimum wage is raised, who it's raised for, whether the communities or the firms can bear it, et cetera. So I think there is no clear definitive answer about whether it reduces employment or, changes inflation. I don't think there's the indefinitiveness there. And there's a big debate about whether it's better or not as good as just putting an earned income tax credit on. So if you get to the economics of it, you don't get a compelling answer. The minimum wage, and I'll just say it, is a social tool, right? For most of us, it's about not finding it very comfortable to think that people work a full-time job and can't afford to buy the gas to get there or feed their families. And that's what ultimately we have to decide as societies. And the Fed doesn't play a role in that. It's just what we have to decide as societies. What can we bear? And then what firms have to do is decide, okay, at that price point, do I need to hire fewer workers and invest in more technology? Do I need to change the equation? Do I need to hire different people? And ultimately, those things will work themselves out. But if you look to the economics to compel you on the minimum wage, you would find that there's just a range of views and a range of findings, and it depends on what year you studied it. If you look at the reasons people often vote for the minimum wage, or in the surveys what people say about the minimum wage, it really is that they find it extraordinarily uncomfortable to repeatedly be confronted with the fact that people who are doing their jobs and doing everything the way they should cannot afford the basic things of living: transportation, housing, and food. And that's just hard.
Thanks. For those of us who don't get to go to the Federal Open Market Committee and cast a vote, could you tell us a little about how that decision-making works? You said something that was kind of surprising when we were meeting with the students earlier about.
Sure. So this is it feels like it's all behind the scenes, right? Because the meetings are closed door. So let me tell you the things that I can. They're all confidential, so I can't share the details of what we do, but I can share the thing that I think it was so meaningful to me the first time I went to the FOMC. I went as a staff person. You're only allowed a limited staff too, and so as people know. But what is really remarkable, and I think it's one of the main reasons I love the Fed so much, is the independence that we have is given to us by Congress, is cherished and closely built, right? We build it. And the way we build it, there are many ways we build it. There are many ways we earn it, basically, the right to be independent, the importance of being independent. One of those ways is the FOMC is a big room. And all of us live in society. So every FOMC participant lives in society, lives in their communities. When we cross a door, it's much like that door. You open big double doors, you cross a threshold. And once people cross that threshold, there is never a mention, not one, of politics, of issues that would be politicized. What we talk about is the economy, our goals, our mandated goals of full employment, price stability, what we need to do, and we debate, fiercely debate and discuss with big differences in how people see things, one from the way they bring the information and how where their communities are, and then we come to a collective decision. And so it really is exactly what you would hope for if you were an American, is people are doing the job they were asked to do without the noise of thinking about politics or any other thing that they have on their minds. And I think that's a really cool thing. The thing that I told you that is really important is I've come on as a voting member this year. And while that is true, I'm a voting member, Reserve Bank presidents rotate, that's actually not meaningful from the way the FOMC works. The 12 Reserve Bank presidents rotate their voting, but every one of us is as meaningful as a voter or not a voter. It doesn't matter. We build our influence and our reputation based on evidence, what we bring to the table, how we reason the arguments, and what that tells you ultimately is that the FOMC is a construct where the best idea wins, right? And the best idea is the product of the collective membership, debating, discussing, and deciding what are we going to do for the American people. You know, at the front of our bank in San Francisco, at the head office, we have a sign. I put it up the day I became president. It says, it's like a touchstone. That's why I keep putting my hand up. It says, our work serves every American and countless global citizens. And when the FOMC comes in, I feel like we have that touchstone, even though it's not there. They have Latin words on the wall. But it really is, our work serves every American and countless global citizens, and we take that responsibility very seriously, and that's how we do our business, voting or not.
I love that. I am going to be looking at some of the questions that have come in. So when I look at my phone, don't think that I'm ignoring you.
I
But
won't.
the last question I'll ask you is whether you could talk about your personal process for decision-making,
Sure.
and particularly those 3 points.
I can,
Yeah.
yes, okay. So I was saying to the students, since, by the way, Rick said it, I just give a big pitch for this. So I met some students here this morning. I did the business roundtable, then I went to meet with students. Boy, we are lucky. Because these students, they were impressive, they asked thoughtful questions, very well considered, and just in dialogue. And the thing I always like when I meet young people is that I see the hope in their eyes. But what I love even more is when I see the hope in the practice, when they have the idealism and the hope, but they put it with the skills and the wherewithal and the thought process and asking hard questions and challenging. So if you ever need inspiration, just ask for a meeting with 10 or 15 students here, or anywhere probably, but definitely here, and you'll see what I saw, and I walked away feeling terrific. But one of the students asked me about, how do I think about things, how do I think about policy, and the very first day I became president, I was giving a town hall for the bank, and someone asked me, well, how are you going to make policy? That's really hard. And I said, well, and I have stickers now. I don't even know if I have any more with me, but I made them into stickers because I want everybody to know sort of this is a life thing you could use too. But here's how I make policy. I'm voraciously curious. I mean, voraciously curious. I want to look at everything, talk to anybody I can, look at the models, read history, put it together, figure it out. When I get to the meeting, I'm confident about the decision I've made because, one, it's so important. I better be thoughtful and confident, but also because I've done all the homework. And then the day I make the decision, I'm humble. Humble about what have I missed, what can I learn tomorrow, and I go back to voraciously curious. And this virtuous cycle of be curious, be confident, be humble is how I make policy, and that's what I put on the sticker. And when I told the students, I said, no matter where you go, if you use those 3 things, you're going to be successful.
I love that. We're going to go on to some questions from the audience.
Oh, terrific. I love audience questions.
One of the first questions is, 2024 may be a critical year for the commercial property market. To what extent will this affect regional and local economies and banks?
Sure, that's a terrific question, certainly on the mind of many, many people. So it is true, just for those who don't follow commercial real estate markets, that commercial real estate, much of it is repricing, refinancing this year, right? Because when people, leasers, owners, et cetera, found that they were that interest rates were going to rise, they locked in low interest rates, but many commercial interest rates for commercial properties are on 3-year cycles. So now the refinancing is coming, and you have to redo it, and so you redo it, but now you're at higher interest rates. And so that's if you hear people say the reckoning, that's the reckoning, right? There'll be this reckoning. Now, that is going to be something that has to be gone through. So what can you say in the back of your mind to say, okay, how bad will that be? Well, let me offer some things. So commercial real estate is a big word that covers a lot of diverse sectors. Not all commercial real estate is the same. So you can break it into multifamily housing, warehouse and storage space, and office space. But even office space has to be broken down into city office space, which is where a lot of the workers left, and suburban office space, which is doctors, lawyers, title insurance companies, you name it, and they're fully in person. So they're still there. So that space in the suburbs and in places where you're really filling it with those kinds of in-person service providers, that's not at risk. And industrial warehousing is booming, and multifamily we have too few units, so that's not as at risk. So what's really problematic is this downtown office space. And so then downtown office space, well, certainly regional banks have some skin in those games, but they're not the big investors in those spaces. Those are usually conglomerated investment pools. They have a variety of different investors, and they will have to find another method of funding themselves. And so we had a commercial real estate roundtable late last year, and I asked people, we had private equity firms and commercial real estate owners and leasers, banks. And what we heard in that, now I'm going to narrow it down to this office property, since that's where the worrisome pieces are, is that these folks have known this. The reckoning is not a surprise. It's been being planned for. People know it's coming, and they've started triaging. So there are certain properties, if you've got Class C office space, then you're probably trying to figure out how to lease that to doctors, lawyers, other people. Say, move closer, Class C is available, we don't have the competition for it. If you have Class A space, well, it's beautiful, and you can find different, people. So in downtown San Francisco, where people say the end of the world has come, especially if they don't live there, we did have big companies you've heard of move out in the tech space, and then AI is moving in. So, people do come when that space is available and the price point is right. So the real piece of the puzzle that's in trouble is that Class B space, where it's not new, it's not that attractive, it's not going to attract the new techie people. It would use a lot of investment, and there's so much Class A sitting there, why would you do it? And it's too expensive or big for the smaller office places. So that will be the place. And then some of the owners or leasers are saying, well, I'll just take it to ground. And I don't know that they always mean tear it down. They mean turn the lights off and wait for the times to be better, and they can do that. And then there are other private equity firms are like, at some point the price point is going to be sufficiently good that I can swoop in. So from the Fed's perspective, what I worry about, or as a policymaker, what I worry about, or what I think about, I wouldn't even say worry, I would say what I think about on commercial real estate is I want to understand what the drag on the economy will be. And so I'm focused on that. And I also want to understand what the stress on the banks will be. And so we're monitoring that, thinking about that, regularly talking to all the entities. And everybody knows it's coming, and they've been working and planning for it. So now it's just, as it starts to go through and digest, it's about how does it shape up for any particular firm.
Yeah, that's helpful, thanks. Do you think that a solution to the economic gaps across the country can be solved by increasing access to higher education? There seems to be a shift in employers relying more on soft skills or maybe on a skills-based hiring rather than degrees and specific job training.
We were just having this conversation earlier today in the roundtable, and we were also having this conversation. I've been doing various events and outreach events, and even in San Francisco, and we're having this exact conversation about what are firms doing. So firms have known for, it's been in conversation for like the last 4 or 5 years. Do we really need to wait for a person to get a 4-year degree only to provide them on-the-job training or ask them to go get the certificate when we need very specialized skills? Or could we just take them out of high school and give them this training? So that gets talked about a lot, but nothing gets done much about it. But the shortage of workers has put a highlight on that. And so now we're hearing more firms in all kinds of sectors, a wide range of sectors, just hiring and running people through certificate programs and running through people through training programs. And then that's caused a surge in interest among community colleges in thinking about how can we provide those training certificates. And so there's a college in Utah, University of Utah, Utah Valley University, where they were a community college and now they also offer 4-year degrees. They're just looking for, okay, what do these need and what skill sets can we get and get people into jobs quickly? So I think that what we're seeing is a transformation. That transformation is far from complete. It's going to require really a mindset shift. Employers are going to have to not only desire to do skill-based training, but actually push it down into the organization so that people realize you don't always need the college degree signal if you've got the skills. But then you have to have skills-based hiring metrics and other things, and that has a chance to really equalize things, but we're not there yet, but we have to work on it. And I'm hearing that. Firms are working on that. On the other side, we have to think about how do we get more certificate programs and more training programs, more what I would call divisible educational opportunities, where you go and maybe you get a 6-month certificate, you work, you say, okay, now I can take a year and I get a year-long training program, but we don't really have that much infrastructure for this. And so right now, I think we're in that transition period, but it's like part of the conversation. Here, much less, I've long been a proponent of college because you can look at the data that lifts up, but someone asked me, wouldn't you be for apprentice programs? And I said, absolutely, if we had them. But if I tell, communities who are historically disadvantaged, go get a training program, there's like none available. So there's 2 choices. You can stop at high school or you can go to college. But if we can fill that gap, well, yes. And the important thing, and this is something else that I said, or that I believe, because I've been all over, it won't just be for people who can't afford college. It'll be for people who don't want to be in college. And there are a lot of those people who don't come from disadvantaged backgrounds. They just want to do something different. They want to work in different things and they don't want 4 years to get there. And so I think we have to, that's why I say it's a mindset shift. We have to change our mindset to get people what they need and when they need it.
Yeah, one of the things that you talked about just now, but also earlier in the business roundtable, was that it's not just about at the very top level of a CEO saying, we're going to hire people without bachelor's degrees now. It's employment is competitive, and there's 2 people, and often it's tempting to just pick the one. And often it's just tempting to pick the one that's got the degree. And one of the things that I've talked about with businesses, particularly when I was at the Workforce Partnership, was if somebody has acquired those skills without the benefit of a degree, often that's an indicator that they're more of a self-starter, that there's somebody who have overcome often obstacles to get those skills. And that's why it's so important to hire people like that.
Well, I think one of the ways that we make sure that we are doing it effectively and in a way that has sticking power, staying power, is if we're saying we're going to do skills-based hiring, then let's have skills-based metrics. And that's what I'm seeing missing in many organizations. They say, okay, we're going to go do skills-based hiring. And it doesn't last beyond a tight labor market. But if it is embedded into the hiring manual, into the assessment, papers, and you basically have the interviewers asking skill-based questions, then you actually have a chance for that list living past just the tight labor market. So, these are things that, again, I just want to be very clear. The Fed plays no role in these things. I don't have any tools for these types of things. So why do I talk about them? Why am I even willing to talk about them? It's because we have a mandate of full employment. And in order to achieve full employment and really think about what that means, we have to have a workforce. And in order for the workforce needs, the demand for workers to be met without being inflationary, we have to have a workforce that can match it. So when people ask me, what do you think we need to have demand and supply come together? Well, I can say we can keep raising the interest rate to make sure demand doesn't outstrip supply, but we can also work on the supply part. I can't control that, but I can definitely identify where the gaps are.
That's great. I'll ask you one last question, and then we'll send people off to break. And you've talked about your vision of the San Francisco Fed as a public service organization. And I just wanted to know if there was any examples you'd like to share, or kind of how you realize that vision of the San Francisco Federal Reserve Bank being a public service organization.
Actually, it's a premier public service organization. And the reason I say that is that we are in public service, and I think everyone who works at the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco or any Federal Reserve in the system understands we are in public service. But you're absolutely right. When I took the job as president, and in my interview to get many interviews to get the job, they asked me, what's your vision? Why do you want this job? And I said, the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco and Federal Reserves across the system, we have all the tools and capabilities. We're mission driven, we're earnest, we are sophisticated, we're well trained. We want to put all of that to being really a premier public service organization, the best in public service. And what that means is not simply doing our job well. It's actually figuring out how to continually do it better and to serve more people and to meet people where they are and source more information and build trust. You know, ultimately, someone asked me, what's your most important tool? And I think they wanted me to say the Fed funds rate. But I said, trust. Public trust in our ability to do our work and our willingness to meet our commitments is our most important tool. If people, and I'll give you an example of that from this year, last year. If people believe when we say we are going to bring inflation down to 2%, and they believe it, well, then they buy into it. And then they say, okay, inflation is going to come down. And if you look at inflation expectations for consumers, you see the more, as we speak, and then they get the data, they see inflation coming back down. The inflation expectations have just come down. So that's a measure of our credibility. And our credibility can only thrive when trust is high. And so that's what being a premier public service organization means to me. It's ensuring that we build as much trust as possible. We talk to people who don't understand or even agree with us, and we do it with openness, transparency, and respect for their views and their questions. And that's what my team and I strive to do every day.
The next portion of this event is a panel led by Kara Green, who is President and Executive Director of the Center on Policy Initiatives. CPI is, quote, the most fabulous research and action organization serving working families. Did I get that right, Karen? All right, yeah. Carol Kim she'll be interviewing Carol Kim and Jerry Sanders. Carol Kim is business manager of the San Diego County Building and Construction Trades Council and CEO of the SDBTC Family Housing Corporation. Jerry Sanders is the former police chief, mayor, head of United Way, and the Red Cross, and I ran out of room to write all of his titles, but he needs no introduction, so Kira, take it away.
All right. Thank you all. Thank you, Jerry and Carol, for being here. One of my goals in starting out this panel was to each of you represents a sector and an organization that a lot of people really think they know, but I want to make sure that they do. So could you take, say, 3 to 5 minutes, describe your members, your constituents, and I know it's pretty diverse, right? There's a lot of different types of people. So maybe just giving us a sense of who do you think about as you're talking about this work today? And tell us a little bit about how they're coming into 2024.
Well, so I am the business manager of the San Diego County Building and Construction Trades Council, and a lot of people are like, what does even that mean, business manager? It's a nonsense title in some ways. It's the chief executive, but my organization represents all the construction unions in the county. So we represent unionized construction workers, and we fight for and advocate for them. We negotiate contracts on large projects, and basically, they're project labor agreements, which are collective bargaining agreements. We represent about 35,000 members here in San Diego County, and I'm also the vice president, one of the vice presidents of the San Diego and Imperial County Labor Council. And so when I think about who I represent, I don't represent just construction workers. I also happen to represent a lot of other workers as well, which are in unions. There are something like 300,000 of them in that council. And I often say we fight for union and non-union workers alike, because the idea is to support and uplift all of them so that we can all be doing better.
Thank you. I'm Jerry. I'm with the Chamber of Commerce. We're the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce, which is the largest chamber on the West Coast, actually, in terms of number of members. We've got over 2,000 members, and they represent from USD to Qualcomm to probably your dry cleaner on the corner to this very smallest businesses in San Diego. We also have labor participation at the chamber. Several of the labor unions belong to the chamber, and we think that's important. That hasn't always been that way, but we know that if we're going to get big things done in San Diego, that we're going to be working with labor, and it's important to have them in on some of the decision-making process as we start thinking about where the chamber's going to go on some of these. We really advocate for business. We advocate for policy, both locally at the city and the county and some of the other cities, but we also advocate on a statewide basis. We advocate in Washington, D.C., and then we also advocate in Mexico and Mexico City. We have many of our members are actually in northern Baja and Tijuana, manufacturing concerns, big organizations, and we work really hard on border infrastructure and trade issues, and really talk about what a rich environment we have with 7 million people living in the Cali Baja region between San Diego County and Tijuana. So it's a huge region, and we really need to talk about it because it gets lost in a lot of the crap that goes on in Washington, D.C. right now. And people don't realize how close we are, the ties that we have, and the importance of our two economies because they're completely intertwined. Every job a manufacturing job in Tijuana creates a half a job in San Diego. So we know that working together, we can really move this region forward. We also really work on policies that help out small business because small business doesn't have the lobbying power, they don't have the law firms, they don't have all of that. So we work on a whole layer of programming so that they can learn how to do that, or we can point them in the right direction. So that's basically what we do.
I appreciate that. And maybe, Jerry, you could just follow up with that, telling us sort of from that perspective, from your members, what have you heard about their experiences in 2023, and what are their hopes and concerns in 2024?
Well, I think 23 was a kind of a bounce back year, and I think we saw a lot of resilience. We were kind of surprised. We thought during the pandemic we were going to lose a lot of membership because, the first thing that goes are your organizations and all of that. We obviously didn't charge anybody who couldn't pay, and we kept them on, but we had a great year. And we also found out that a lot of the stuff we could do it's really important to do live streaming, and it really helps small business out to be able to access us. Lauren Cazares is here, is part of a team that sent out a newsletter twice a week at first, and then once a week on all the resources available, everything from the county, the state, and the feds. So as we're going into 24, we have very strong membership. They're feeling very good about things. They're concerned about inflation, obviously, we all are, and we've seen the effect of it. And we know that when tomatoes go up to $2.99 a pound, they don't ever come back down. So everybody's, concerned about where inflation's going to go, even though we've seen the easing, at least in the newspapers. I don't know that we always notice that in other ways. I think the other issues that we really focus heavily on is housing. And I know that's what Carol focuses on. We're really concerned about the housing. We work with every builder that's building anything, and we go to city council or the county on every single project trying to get those built, because we realize we have to have the full range of housing, and we need it immediately. We also, one of our 3 big issues is childcare. And we found out how difficult it was during the pandemic without childcare for working mothers or working families. It's not just mothers, but fathers. However, I do know that most of us fathers don't bear anywhere near the burden as the mothers. So we're working on initiatives with that. We worked at the state level, we worked at the federal level, and I think that's where we'll continue working really hard as we move forward. And I think that's what our membership has really talked to us about.
Well, coming into 2024, interestingly, in the construction industry specifically, things are going very well. We have had a real investment and surge of funding coming into San Diego to help us actually build up our infrastructure projects. There's the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act along with the IRA and the CHIPS Act and those kinds of things that have been happening and coming out of Washington that has really allowed us to leverage those resources in a way that we have not seen before in San Diego County. And one of the projects that actually pertains very closely to the sort of the binational economy here that's going to be coming soon is the Otay Mesa border crossing, East Border Crossing, and that's under Project Labor Agreement. So we are gearing up to be able to tackle that along with a lot of other things. So in that space, in the construction industry, things are very hot. And what I often say about the economy is that construction is one of the canaries in the coal mine, right? When there is a recession in the economy or a slowdown, you'll see construction dry up first, especially in the private sector. So we hate it when that happens, and we're always trying to be careful about what we're projecting, we're paying attention to what folks are saying, et cetera, regarding those things so that we can be prepared if those situations arise, and we're hoping that it won't. So I'm gonna knock some wood somewhere. There's floor under this carpet, so there we go. And you know, all that said, it's, you know, so in construction, it's been pretty good, but I will also note that for working families, which is the vast majority of the people who live and work in San Diego County, it's, you know, it's almost all of us, like 98% of us. We are people who've been feeling the pinch of the inflation that's been happening over the past couple of years, and it, you know, the cost of living has increased in a way where our wages have not kept up. We are definitely struggling in that space, and you see that a lot in some of the data that's out there. When we're talking about the economy specifically, you know, it's interesting. I was actually reading through some things. I was reading through the Oxfam report that just came out this last year, or last week, right, or something, and it said that the 5 wealthiest men in the world have actually beyond doubled their wealth over the past, since 2020. Since 2020, during that pandemic, they actually more than doubled their wealth, while 5 billion people slid further into poverty. So 5 billion people lost wealth. Here in the United States, 46% of working people do not have any retirement savings. That's 46%. And something like, I think it was 2/3 of people over the age of 50 have less than $100,000 put away for retirement, which is not good news for any of us, because as our previous speaker mentioned, we live in a society. We live in a society and we're all connected to each other. And so what's happening to that many people in the country and across the globe, especially this global capitalist economy that we're all dealing with, it's actually absolutely hitting home here in the mindsets, the pocketbooks, and the lived experiences of every single one of the people that we are interacting with. And I think we see some of this acting out of the stress and anxiety around the economy in things as simple as people running red lights. Anybody notice that there's like, people are crazy now? They don't actually pay attention to like traffic rules anymore. I think that that's actually a symptom of just the fact that we're like, none of this is working for us anymore. So not even these rules apply. I don't know what's happening, but I think we have to actually take it seriously. It's funny, but it's not funny, right? This is the thing. And so I'm gonna say, on the one hand, construction industry, awesome, it's going gangbusters, and we're hoping to bring more and more people into the unionized side of it, because that means they're gonna be able to make a living, a real family-supported, like middle-class living, along with benefits, healthcare benefits, and a retirement pension, which, by the way, that's a good thing. And then And then, but on the other hand, you know, so many swaths of our industry sectors, there are so many people struggling to even feel like they can keep their heads above water. So I think that's on the one hand, inflation, because inflation, by the way, is such an interesting, sticky indicator in terms, one of the reasons it's so sticky for us is that most of our economic indicators are all set around the stock market and how that performs. And here's another statistic. 10%, I know I love my stats, 10% of Americans, the highest earning 10%, the wealthiest 10%, happen to own 93% of the stocks in the United States. 93%. 50%, the bottom 50% of Americans owns 1%. Just one. And yet all of our economic indicators are really set around how the stock market is doing. That's a problem, because the economy has to be more, and Mary said it herself, it's more than just what's happening in the markets. It's got to be what's happening in our lived experience. And I think it's incredibly important that when we're having these conversations, we have to acknowledge that and face it head on.
I think that's a really important point, Carol, this point of, you know, focusing on people, how the world affects people. And also part of this, the purpose of this conversation is about what is life like in San Diego? What are we working towards? How are we doing it? I appreciate that both of you also talked about your organizations and your work as advocacy work. And so I'm gonna ask you a few things because I want to say just a little bit about why. I think often we start talking about solutions to the problems in our society, and we have a hard time coming to consensus around them. And there are many reasons for that. But one is that we often don't talk about what is our vision. What is the thing we're actually trying, are we working towards the same thing? So I'm gonna ask you about this in a couple of areas. I'm gonna start with housing, which Jerry, you mentioned as a concern. And I want you to start by telling me, in your sector, the members that you represent, the people that you talk to, what would your vision look like if everybody in San Diego was housed? What would our mix of housing stock look like? And how would it be different from how it is now? And tell us about any policy initiatives you're working on to move towards that vision.
You know, we think about that all the time. We know that there has to be a rich mix of housing. We've got to go. My wife and I have made ourselves kind of not so welcome in Kensington from time to time. Kensington's a very insular neighborhood where people want it the same way as it is. They don't ever want to see it change. And we put a yes on SB 10 sign in our yard because we felt very strongly that if you work at Starbucks, like Sean Elo has said, you should be able to live in Kensington in some type of housing there. And we firmly believe that. We firmly believe we need to build a much denser mix in areas like Adams Avenue, and I'm just using my local thing, where people just go berserk because they just see too many people there and people that don't look like them. I have to tell you, I've had some strange experiences in Kensington. People I really like had no on SB 10 signs, very strident. And then when that was over, they had thankful for neighbor signs up in their windows, which just has irritated me beyond belief. So what they said is, we're thankful for neighbors that look exactly like us. And we think that we need a mix of neighborhoods. Our neighborhoods should be like the richness of San Diego. And you can only do that by building a mix of housing, whether it's ADUs or it's very small apartments or it's more apartments. But every apartment can't cost $3,000 a month. And those are the ones we see being built. And that's not going to help the people who are doing the work in San Diego. The people who are doing the construction in our neighborhoods are not going to be renting those apartments. So I just think that all of us need to think about how we can kind of put our foot forward and start influencing. And fortunately, my wife is much smarter than I am, and she is tougher than nails. So she tells me how we're going to do influencing, and she does it on her walks. But I think that's important, and the Chamber's a part of that. We're a part of wanting to see that mix of housing all throughout San Diego, so everyone has a chance for that.
Thank you. I also appreciate your wife is obviously a good influencer. She's convinced her husband to know that she's smarter. So that's good work. How about you, Carol? What do you?
So housing is such a big issue, and I was just up in Sacramento yesterday and the day before, and we were meeting with folks from the HCD as well. So, and for those of Housing and Community Development Agency, state agency, HCD, and the Treasurer's Office, who runs the LIHTC and the CCAC programs, and we were also meeting with folks from the policy side to discuss this. But we need to build more. That's the first thing. We need to be creative about how we finance those things. The fact is, we can't supply side ourselves out of this, and we really do need to get past the notion that nothing's going to change. Things are going to change. Your neighborhood has to evolve, and I think that that's what Jerry's getting at when he talks about Kensington. The fact is that we need more integrated housing. And by the way, most of us, how many of you are very alarmed by the homelessness crisis right now? Just about everybody. So we can't, by the way, incarcerate ourselves out of homelessness. That's not the way we solve the problem. It just isn't. We actually need to be, you know how you solve homelessness? Is by building housing and housing people. That's how you solve homelessness. And so we've got to actually be really creative about doing things a little bit differently. The fact of the matter is the state legislature and the California state government have actually over the past decade passed something over 50 different bills that streamline the permitting process for housing. That's not the problem. When people tell you it's a CEQA issue, that's crazy talk. You can build, especially if you're building affordable housing or 100% affordable housing, you can build that anywhere you want, basically, when it comes to that, and you can do it ministerially. So those are not the issues. The issues are the financing concerns, the fact that all of our financing processes and systems are profit-driven, and it's about profit extraction or developer fees or all those types of things. It makes it very hard to build one. And then, of course, we've also got the NIMBY concerns, the no on SB 10, et cetera. We just need to realize that if we want to solve homelessness, which, by the way, this last year in California, the percentage of people who experienced first-time homelessness ever in their lives went up by 6% statewide. So that's a number of things. I think wages are incorporated. I think we've got to look at profit extraction concerns. And the fact is that, and we'll talk about this maybe later if we discuss wages and minimum wage and that kind of thing, is that when we increase these wages, that's actually a signal to landlords to increase the rent. The rent is already too goddamn high. Sorry, I know. But it's just true. So I want to note that we have to be looking at this differently and more creatively. We've got to actually think about, does housing become an entitlement the way healthcare is? How do we create permanent revenue streams that allow us to actually build? And who do we have to bring together in coalition to get those things done? And we're going to be absolutely tackling that here in San Diego County. If not this year, then definitely in the next election cycle and other places. We must do those things, because if we're not, this is not a good situation. And by the way, just so we can also go back to that incarceration thing, because we are doing a lot of that. We're criminalizing poverty, and that's not okay, first of all. That's morally just wrong, the wrong thing to do. But beyond that, we're actually incarcerating somebody for a year costs $106,000 to $131,000 a year annually. So even with the rents being as crazy as they are, none of them are $9,000 a month for a studio, which is what incarceration basically is, right? So let's be real about what it costs us. It costs us even if we do nothing. It's gonna cost us. Even if we decide to take the path of criminalizing everybody, arresting everybody, and putting them in jail if they're camping out or whatever, it's going to cost us anyway. So let's be real about this and figure out how we actually create the revenue to address this problem meaningfully.
Thank you. I also am going to just take a moment to acknowledge that this is a well-put-together event, but somebody made the mistake of saying I could be a moderator. Moderating is not really what people would describe. So I just want to take a moment to say, part of what I think is in that answer too is if we're going to have more multifamily housing, then we're going to have to do a better job of protecting renters. There are too many people being forced out of their homes because rents are allowed to just rise because that's what the market will tolerate, but it's not what all our families can tolerate. So, back to being the moderator. Another one of these tricky issues that we have all the time in this region is around transportation, right? There's a relationship between where we live and how we get to and from work. And I want to say, like, the arguments out there seem really complicated to me because they constrain the solutions. On the one hand, people say gas prices are too high. And on the other hand, and so they come up with policy solutions like we should reduce taxes on gasoline. And then the same people say, our roads are in horrible shape, and somebody should do something about that. And they also say, and you know what about these roads? They're too crowded, so build some more of them and expand them. So with that mix of things, I have the question to you of what would our transportation system look like if it were a functioning transportation system that met the needs of your members, of your constituents, of your community? What would it look like? And what do you have ideas about how we pay for it?
Well, Carol knows how we pay for it. She just kind of initiative qualified. It's funny, when I first went to the chamber, and Qualcomm used to love to have me come up to their headquarters at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, knowing that I would have to fight the traffic home. And then they would talk about what we need to do about the traffic. And I don't blame them, but we allowed some serious overbuilding up there. We have talked about a trolley line up there for a long time, and then possibly a gondola that goes up onto the mesa from the train tracks. The solution's gonna be all of these things. Everybody wants to see more bus traffic, but everybody thinks somebody else is going to take it so that they have better room on the streets. Everybody wants to see more lanes on the freeway, and we know as soon as you build another lane, you'll have more cars on the freeway because people said that now there's more capacity. It's going to require a multi-phase part on this, and we all know that, and we know it's really difficult because a lot of these things become political when they should become science. And we're seeing that on all sorts of issues, but we really need to start working on how we're going to fix all these things. And we'll get the buses where we need the buses on the streets, and we'll get the trolley lines to places they really need to go. And then we can keep the trolley lines safe, because right now people are saying, I don't want to ride on a trolley or a bus. Especially since a pandemic, we're all, just talked about, we're all crazy, but none of us want to touch anything. I used to pick up trash on my walks in the neighborhood. I wouldn't go near a piece of tissue in the street to save my life. And I thought it was just my wife and I, because we're old, talking about crazy drivers. But I do think we're going to have to recalibrate at some point and really start letting some of the science talk to us about how we fix these things. And I'll turn it over to Carol and her initiative. We haven't looked at it yet. The chamber joined with the transportation people on the last 2 initiatives, but that's been quite some time.
So yes, there's an initiative. And when we talk about increasing density in our neighborhoods in order to accommodate more housing and a greater mix of housing, and by the way, that housing should be rental and ownership. We should be building, it's going to be a lot more multifamily units, but when we're talking about multifamily units, they can't just be for rent. We should also be selling them as condos or townhouses or what have you, largely because, again, as we know, for working families, home ownership is a pathway to intergenerational wealth, and there's really, at this point, no other way to build that for most working families. And so the fact that currently our housing market, sorry to go back to that, currently our housing market is so challenging means that we're going to have a whole generation or two of people like Gen Xers. We're struggling to buy and afford housing, and we're doing better than our millennial and Gen Z colleagues. I don't know how they're going to actually do that unless their parents own housing and own enough of it that they can like leave it to them and their sibling. Like you can have this house and you can, I don't know if that happens, but there's going to be that kind of thing. So I don't know how we actually, that's not even going to become a vehicle for intergenerational family wealth anymore, because for middle class working families, because homeownership is so out of bounds for lots of folks. But in order for us to actually increase density in a responsible and meaningful way, especially to deal with our climate concerns and other things, is we're going to have to actually have real, robust transit. And it's going to have to be a mode shift in terms of how we all get around. And that's going to mean that we actually make it harder to use a car. If you think about our big cities like Chicago or New York or Paris or London or any of these places, yes, there are cars going through all of those places, but it's expensive to drive in those communities. How many of you have tried to like park in New York City? No, don't even, like, right? Like, you've got to like take out a mortgage just to do that. So I'm saying, at this point, but that's also why their transit systems have such high ridership and usability and are, they are invested in a meaningful way. So we've got to get here in San Diego. Our current mayor and our past mayors as well have talked about like big city stuff, but there is that, and the measure that Jerry's mentioning, we have on the ballot coming this November. It's the Let's Go San Diego measure. It's for a 0.5-cent sales tax that will help fund the RTP, which is the regional transit plan that SANDAG and other agencies have put together, that will actually give us the opportunity to build a transit system in San Diego that gets you where you need to go in under an hour, maybe even in 15, 20 minutes if we're like super ambitious. And I think we can get there, we just need to agree to do it. And so, these are parts of all of these things that we're talking about when we say things can't stay the same. They just can't. We're way past that now. So for us to make the shift and move into the next phase of how we operate and work and live together well in San Diego County is for us to start acting like that.
Thank you. I also want to you mentioned this point about other cities and transit in them. And Jerry, you were talking about aging. And I was lucky, I have a great employer, so I got to go on vacation recently to another city in the world. And it occurred to me as I was riding a bus, because I committed that I'm going to take buses, that when I got on this bus in Southern Country, most of the riders in the middle of the day, which is when you can ride a bus as a tourist, were elderly people. And it occurred to me that this gave them a freedom to move about their space that a car might deny them, as they felt less safe being on a car. They also weren't able to use, and trolleys and systems like that are great, but they're often elevated, or there are a lot of stairs to get underground. A bus was such an accessible piece of transportation for them. And I just thought, I want to tell people in San Diego this, because I hear people in San Diego say all the time, we cannot get people, middle-class people in particular, to take buses. And I think it's an issue that as our population ages, if we make a good bus system, we will actually all be freer to live in our communities and explore them. So I want to put that out there. Again, the job of moderator, I will not be hired for again. But my mama taught me if they give you a mic, say something.
I got rid of my big F-150 pickup because I'm aging and people are terrified to see an old man driving a giant truck. I'm down to a small Toyota.
I will neither agree nor disagree with that statement. I'll just let the audience know that. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is how we solve the problem of so many families struggling in our region. And each of you works with an organization that focuses at least on a big part of workforce development. And so workforce development is about increasing skills and training, and that's obviously important. But all of those jobs also create and depend on jobs that have been historically low wage. We heard about childcare workers, the need for childcare. We heard the mention of people like Amazon workers who are delivering things and the low wages that or in that industry. So what do you think of when you think about a healthy economy, this mix of just raising wages, which we're going to have to do for those jobs, and building skills? What does that look like for you? How do you think about balancing those two things as you do the work? And Carol, why don't we start with you?
So, the building trades unions are actually, we have this thing called apprenticeship. And some of you may have heard of this. Apprenticeship is an age-old model. It is millennia old. But here, currently, contemporaneously speaking, there's not a lot of them. And in fact, Mary also touched on that. She said, a lot of employers will say they want to provide training for their workers and their workforce and their employees directly so that they can upskill them, but just don't. And apprenticeship actually provides a model where workers get trained on the job. So they earn while they learn. So because it's predicated on the job training, you actually have a situation where people are not paying tuition and being educated and upskilled in their crafts or trades or whatever it is. And the construction unions, we do it better than anybody. I'm just gonna say it, and I proudly stand by that. It's just true. Something like 95% of people who graduate in the state of California from an apprenticeship across any industry sector graduate from a union construction program. And part of it is because we have created a model where the workers in the union, as well as the employers, the signatory contractors, pitch in together. So every worker, as part of our collective bargaining agreement, like for instance myself, I pay like $1.60 for every hour I work into an education trust, which then helps to train and educate the next generation of electricians, because I happen to belong to IBW 569. But that's a model. I just want to also note that obviously not everybody's going to be a construction worker, and there are lots of other industries and sectors where we need this kind of opportunity. I know that teachers are working on this. Teachers unions currently at San Diego Unified are working on trying to develop something similar. We're seeing a push for this in healthcare with nursing, and again, it's the unions that are driving this. And I think that the reason that when you've got a union involved or unions involved, it's more sustainable because, again, people are pitching in together, and it's not just reliant on an employer deciding to be benevolent and or making smart choices for their business and investing, meaningfully investing in the training of their staff and their future staff as well. And what's interesting about education in general, because I come out of education. My background is in education, and I spent something like 2 decades working in the education sector. Higher education is incredibly expensive because, again, it has actually, it's been commodified the way everything else in our economy gets commodified. We have told generations of working people that the way you become successful and you actually make a real wage that's going to support your children and put them into the middle, like give them the lift they need to get into the middle class and stay there themselves, is to go to college. And unfortunately, because of the way we have disinvested in our public education systems, especially our higher ed systems, and in the way we've allowed tuition to become like this another loan vehicle that is just, again, extractive. It's extractive for profit for those 5 guys who are going to become trillionaires in the next decade. Like that sort of thing, it's all part of that system. And so we have to realize that so much of all of these things are part of this broader system, which we call our economy, that does these things on purpose. Like it's designed to create these outcomes. And I'm gonna say, and it's probably not a popular thing to say necessarily in this room, but our economy is not a force of nature. It doesn't exist in the wild. You don't go on safari in the Serengeti and go, oh, there it is, there's the economy, there's the free market. That's not it, right? It's a man-made system with inputs and outputs, and it's designed to create the outputs it creates. So frankly, it's designed to ensure that those 5 guys in the Oxfam report are gonna become trillionaires. I don't even know what that number is. Trillionaires in the next 10 years because they're on track. 5 years, is it 5 years now? He read the report too. And frankly, and it means that the rest of us are really just trying to keep our heads above water. So we have to decide, and we can do this through regulation, we can do this through policy, we can do this through, which is regulation, frankly, if we're being totally real. But we can also just decide that, these are not the outcomes we want, and change the inputs to get different outputs, and ensure that people are able to, one, attain the skills to be able to make a good living, and then also realize that, wages are, we have to talk about the wages, right? The fact is, right now, we're seeing this sweep of unionization happening across the country. And frankly, I think it's because, especially our young people, but definitely even our middle-aged people like me, who are, in their 40s, we're looking up and we're going, this is bullshit. This is just not okay. Why should I be working 2 or 3 jobs and then having a side hustle, and I still can't figure out how to save for my retirement, which is coming in like another decade and a half, right? We are literally people are gonna have to work until they die. And that's a crazy thing. So we have really got to figure out how to and I think unions are such a big part of this. We have to structurally empower workers inside an economic system that is named after the thing it prioritizes, which is capital. And that's what unions do. And it's one of the reasons I work for unions and have always advocated for them. But beyond that, we also have to decide collectively as a society that this is not working for us and that we've got to do something differently. And so, again, these are all scary things, and it's a time of huge transition right now. We're talking about that just in terms of San Diego locally, in our growth that we're gonna need, the housing we're gonna need, the transit we're gonna need. But we also have to talk about how that we can't pretend that is not part of these bigger global systems that completely trap us unless we're willing to all collectively do something different.
Thank you, Carol. I also want to ask that you stop looking at me every time you say Generation X or in the 40s.
I'm Generation X. I'm very proud of it.
I have
like
not
it.
disclosed my age. I'm just trying to see what I can
because
get away with in this room.
I'm going to be 48 in April, so these are the...
Well done. Jerry, who's also in his 40s, could you take on that?
Oh, I'm not 48 plus 48, though. Carol, I'm trying to open my mind more as I get older instead of closing it, but some of that stuff's far beyond me. I'm Tony Young here. We've been together for a long time, and I appreciate the workforce partnership, and I appreciate the fact that I'm on Chula Vista, they're talking about the educational opportunities, and they're talking about giving high school students a chance to be earning part of their degree while they're in high school, and they're talking about having a bunch of campuses together and really reducing the costs and all of that. I went to junior college. It's community college now, but it was called junior college then, because it meant we weren't smart enough to go to real college, which I found out later. But, I was out at Miramar as the academy lieutenant when I was on the police department, and some of the programs that I thought were the most interesting, they trained mechanics for small aircraft. They trained mechanics for Caterpillar. They trained mechanics for Toyota and Chevys and all of that. And these people would not even get through their training before they were snapped up. And it was a very low-cost system at that point. I mean, community college used to be free, which it should be now. That's one of the steps that we could do. The college master plan was always supposed to be community college was free, you're supposed to go there, and then you would transfer to a low-cost state university, or you could go to the UC system, or you could go somewhere else. But I think the skills building has to be the most important part, because a lot of our kids are not going to go to college for a lot of reasons. They don't want to go to college. They can't afford to go to college. They don't have any place to live while they go to college. I understand all that. And I think we need more skills-based education that's very accessible. And ideally, it would be free, so that they can start participating in the economy. And a lot of these jobs are good jobs. It's much like the apprenticeship with the unions, and I applaud the unions for doing apprenticeship. I've been out and seen what they do. I've been out to IBEW, and I've been out to the iron workers, and I've been out to several of them where young people come in and learn skills that are going to give them a career that they can raise a family on. So I really think that's where we're going to have to go, and I think education has to rethink itself. And education is not any different than any of these other giant systems. It is really hard to get out of your own way in education because you've got so many different interests involved, and you've just got the inertia about changing things. But I'm starting to see it change, and I think it's pretty exciting.
You absolutely can.
Okay, so I agree with you 100% that community college especially should be free, and that four-year universities should be very low tuition, if not free, as they used to be in California. The UCs used to be free. You could go to school for free.
Well, it wasn't free. When I went to San Diego State, it was $52.50 a semester.
Free-ish.
There you are, free-ish, free-ish. So, but here's the thing is that what we have to realize is, several decades ago, and I'm not suggesting that's your time, but when community college was free and when four-year bachelor's degree universities were free-ish, we were making a much more significant public investment in education, and we could because the taxation system was different. People on the top end, like the corporations and high-income earners, paid a lot more of what they were earning into our public systems. And what's happened over time is that has really decreased. Policy and regulation has been used in the opposite direction. And things like our transit system that we're trying to build and fund is coming off the backs of average people who are just buying eggs and milk because it's through a sales tax, which is very regressive. So we have actually created, again, an economy that actually centers those outcomes and uplifts those outcomes, and we need to realize that that's not okay. And if we want to get to a place where our public investments are at that scale again, then we have to have everybody pitching in. And beyond that, I also want to note that when these large corporations, especially the big giant multi-global ones, like the global multinational ones, when those corporations are paying very low wage jobs, and I'm gonna name hotels, Marriott, which is a global corporation, Walmart, all these kinds of, when they're paying really low wages, that stuff isn't free. The public is actually subsidizing, not through our social welfare programs, we're not subsidizing the poor, we're subsidizing the rich, because those workers are helping create the profit for those particular companies, and they are actually offloading the costs of paying them good wages and benefits that they need to be able to live onto us. And then in the meantime, they're telling us that no, it's okay because these are just entry-level jobs. Let's be real. Hotel housekeepers are grown-ups. People who work in fast food and the restaurant industry as servers are grown-ups. When we talk about these types of people at Walmart, I see so many retirees, people who are actually elderly, who should be at home hanging out with their grandchildren. They're working at Walmart. They're grown-ups. I'm sorry, they are. So, this is what I'm saying is we just have to realize that it's all effed up.
So it's okay if I go to work for Walmart because I don't want to stay at home hanging out with grandchildren. I've got 6 of them. They run me ragged. I agree with Carol on a lot of things. I don't agree with everything, though. And I think that people deserve opportunities, but I think they got to work hard for them. And I think a lot of people work very hard and they don't have opportunities. So, but I think the state, especially the state, and I think about the federal government, I think we have plenty of money. I don't think it's spent very well. I don't think it's very effectively spent, and I don't think it's tracked, and I don't think we have any way of knowing how it's been effective. We talked about housing money, homeless money. They've spent billions and they're not building anything. Now, I'm trying to figure out where this is going, into studies, or is it, I mean, I don't have a clue. But that's just, those are billions of dollars that are not tracked. There's no effectiveness measures whatsoever. And that's where I think our problem really lies, is these huge bureaucracies get all this stuff and then they're not being held accountable for any of it. And I think that's part of the issue and it's part of the solution. And I'm not gonna go into the tax stuff because it just doesn't, I pay my taxes, I'm happy to pay them. I don't wanna pay any more. I don't think I need to pay any less.
I appreciate this because this is what a conversation looks like. I want to just ask each of you, you've identified in this system like something that's broken about that system, right? Whether it's your assessment, Jerry, that it's the bureaucracy, Carol, you talking about the shape of it. Do you want to just take a minute to talk about like, well, then what's the solution to that you envision? What would you like to see happen?
I'm sorry, I'm old, I didn't hear.
Oh, what is the solution to the problem as you've defined it in
Well,
terms of
we need to have some independent oversight on some of this stuff. Sandag, I think, even though it's got a bad rap right now, I think they've done a pretty good job, but you've got an independent oversight group that looks at how they spend their money, and they have an obligation to report that out publicly, and I think Sandag has done a pretty doggone good job of building, whether it's the North Coast Rail. I think they've done a good job. But you get into the state, they decide they're gonna put a new system in for DMV, for EDU, for all these things. They spend mega millions and the system doesn't work when it's done. They shouldn't be doing that. That's simply something that they're not good at, and they should be hiring somebody and then having independent oversight over that. But, I'd really like to see where all the money for homelessness has gone. I guess what's interesting to me, and I've talked to Tara Lawson-Reamer. Tara and I probably don't agree on 50% of stuff. I'm going to be generous there to her. But, when she talks about giving elderly people, seniors who are going to be forced out of housing, $500 a month so they can stay in an apartment, that's the best investment we can make. Costs a lot more to get them off the street later on. And we should be prioritizing and we should be spending a lot of that. You may not have to build a lot more. We need to build more housing. We may not need to build as much as we think if we can keep people in the housing that they're in right now.
I agree with you about that, absolutely, Jerry. I will say this about the housing, like where does all that money for housing go, right? So back when we were building the most amount of housing, which was around the 70s, between the 50s and the 70s, we built hundreds of thousands of units across the state as well as across the country. And during that time, the federal government, HUD, was doing direct grants to developers to build. So if I was a developer or a part of a development team as a nonprofit, what have you, I could apply to HUD, they could give me a grant, and I could actually take the money, the check that they mailed to me, and build the property, the housing that I had told them I would build in exchange. These days, it all comes through tax credits. And what is the benefit of tax credits? It's slower, it's way more expensive, and if you're wondering why, it's because tax credits go through our banks and our financing systems, and they extract profit from them. So when we're asking for oversight of these systems, it's not necessarily the government per se that is spending money in weird ways. Everything is coming through tax credits now, whether it's for housing, whether it's for business expansion, what have you. And frankly, all that means is that, everybody's taking a cut. There are giant, what we would call cottage industries, if they weren't so damn profitable and enormous now, that have exploded over the past 30, 40, 50 years in these sectors because, it's a way to get more money, make more money, and again, do it off of the public, because all those things come through our public systems. So this is about policy, it's about our regulation or lack of it, and it's about the decisions that have been made by people who are actually creating an economy and designing it to create the outcomes that we have.
Well, there's another piece to this, though. Before whatever proposition was, I forgot, Prop 13. The cities built the infrastructure, and developers came in and built houses, and they sold them a lot cheaper because they didn't have to pay all the infrastructure costs and all of that. When Prop 13 was gotten rid of, then all of a sudden, cities had to find, the state had to find new sources of money. So you start charging for all that infrastructure. So it goes back and forth. I've talked to people in the housing industry that liked it before because they could sell things cheaper. I don't see any nefarious things going on like that. I don't think that they build and try to get every last penny, but I think it gets much more and more difficult, and especially with the amount of regulation that goes on. And you can easily see a huge amount of the cost of a house, of a new house, is because of government regulation. It's because you have to have certain stormwater standards. You have to have, no water can leave your property. There's things that just don't work, and it costs tremendous amounts for the builders to build that, and it's going to get passed on, and we need to start getting real about some of the regulation that goes on, some of the record keeping that gets done, some of the stuff that is really difficult for especially small builders, and that's who we should be working with to get done.
So I'm one of those small builders. At the Family Housing Corporation, we are actually in the middle of redeveloping our property right now. We own land outright in National City where we have almost 23 acres, which is a lot of land for affordable housing, let me say, where we have owned and we built back in the late 60s, early 70s, 456 units. Those covenants are now expired. We have maintained it as affordable, just altruistically speaking, and we are continuing now. Now we're in a phase where we're realizing, okay, with our density bonuses and all these other things, we can increase the density. By right, I can increase the density up to 1,200 to 1,500, and with density bonuses, 2,100 units on that property. We're not going to get up there because it's too expensive and all the rest. But I will say that it is, while we're working with an affordable housing developer partner, Wakeland, to do this, we are knocking down 36 units. We're putting up 96. We're breaking ground on it in just a month, which I'm so excited. It's something that we've been working on for years, and we're finally there. So we're starting the process. But I will tell you that no, it's absolutely true that they nickel and dime. The bank, like Chase recently just said, well, we had this financing stack all set up, and they're like, well, you're using this one group here, so we're gonna tack on another $50,000 fee here and a $100,000 fee there. This is arbitrary. It's good for the project for that financing to be there, but just because they're part of the stack, they want to add another fee. So like these are the types of costs I'm talking about where everything is because and frankly, I was told push back because they'll get rid of it if you push back, which tells me it's not something that's paying for anything except somebody's bonus.
Well, now I know why I'm the moderator. We're gonna wrap up this panel, which is I want to say, I think this is the kind of conversation we need to be having in our region, where we really just talk about how are we diagnosing the problems, what do we see as the solutions, and have those open and in public. And I wish there was even more time to take more input from the rest of you. I'm really sorry about that. But to close this out, I got a question. That's why I was reading my text. It wasn't me like just talking to my friends, even though I'm very young and that's how kids do. We talk to our friends on text. So to close this out, the question is, as you look at this economy and this region, we've talked obviously about some of its problems, but what would you tell a young person, say, graduating from this private institution of higher learning that charges tuition? What would you tell them about the economy and about the San Diego region? What would you tell them how to think about this? And
Well, I'm always bullish on San Diego. When I look at what's going on right now, when I look at Mission Valley in the innovation district that San Diego State's building around that property with 4,600 units, when I look at the housing being built throughout that area, when I look at the Midway Rising, when I look at downtown with a lot of the building that's going on right now, they're creating a lot of jobs. And they're jobs that are every level. And I think that's really important. And I look at the Navy. The Navy's our recession-proofing in San Diego. The Navy and Marine Corps. When the recession hits, they don't stop spending. They spend even more frequently. We've got more ships coming in here, which creates far more jobs. And we're just seeing things like that all over San Diego. When I talk to the people from chambers and EDCs up and down the state, they don't have any cranes up right now. You look at San Diego downtown, cranes everywhere. You look at UCSD, they're building, it's unbelievable what they're building. You look at all of these Southwest College and the plans for down in Chula Vista, all of that is really exciting stuff. So I just encourage our young people to get out and look around. And, you know, they're going to find jobs. There's jobs for everybody who wants to work right now. They may not be really good at first, but, you know, I think things are getting better in a lot of those areas.
I'm also bullish on San Diego. Clearly, you can't live here and not love this place and want to not. And I want to encourage young people to stay, to be here and stay and invest, and help us make San Diego a more equitable, economically sustainable economy for everybody who lives and works here. And the way we do that is by, again, working together in creative and collaborative ways, partnering with people that we don't agree with all the time, but at least 50% of the time, if we're being generous, and, and hopefully we are. And frankly, you know, actually deciding that, and that's hard work, by the way. I just want to say it's really easy to like bomb throw and, you know, call people out and do that sort of thing. The hard stuff is actually having those feelings, but also realizing that there's a constituency you serve and that the best way to do that is to find partners that will actually allow you to grow the pie for everyone and not just for some. So I would encourage young people to stay in San Diego, even if it's terrible and expensive. I apologize. We're working really hard to make it better. Join a union. Form a union in your workplace, and then beyond that, you know, really again, remember how hard, and the other thing I would say is remember how hard it is right now, because that's something that people forget as they get older, is they forget how hard it was when it was hard. And they don't want to let go of what they've got now when they get older and have more sometimes. And I want to remind people, you know, remember what that's like and don't forget that and carry those struggles in your heart as we try to make life a little bit less hard for others. I think at the end of the day, if we can decrease suffering, that is a noble, noble cause and goal to achieve.
So, to close this out, I want to thank our two panelists. Thank you very much for your honesty and your openness, and you're really funny, both of you. Thank you.